Hi, this is Kevin Trainer. Welcome to my tutorial for the controller coding assignment for the Django course. This is part one of the tutorial, and in part one we're going to take the controller parts that we used in the last of our coding assignments. We're going to refactor them. Okay, so this is all going to be about refactoring, which is to say, in part one, we're not going to really add any functionality. We're going to change the code in a way to make it more readable, more maintainable. That's what refactoring is all about. So what's the first one that we're going to do? Well, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go into urls.py, and we're going to set up a separate urls.py for the course info app. That's the typical thing that we do, and we didn't go that far in the last of the coding assignments. We're going to do that now. Okay, so let's see what we've done so far in urls.py. Let's open up urls.py, and we see that we've got just one urls.py file, and it's in the directory that's associated with the project as a whole. It's not in the directory for the course info app. And this is kind of different than your typical approach. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Let's forward some of these to a new urls.py that will be in course info. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the one that's in the project, and I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to go up to the course info folder and paste it and call it urls.py. Okay, and when we get done, it looks pretty good. We're going to have all of these, except we're not going to have the admin. Okay, because the admin is going to be handled in the top level URLs configuration. Okay, so all of the URLs that have to do with course info are going to be forwarded here, and that's all we need to do. Okay, and then how are we going to change the other urls.py, the one for the project? Well, we're kind of going to do the opposite. We're going to take out the ones that we moved. Okay, and now we need to do the classic forwarding. Now, how would we do that? Well, we would do it like this. I've already coded this. Some of you may have heard me say that I'm going to take it from my already baked solution. And I didn't explain that, so I'm going to explain that now. I think these tutorials work out well when they are kind of designed like a television cooking show. We learned to cook a new dish, and pretty typically on a television cooking show, the chef has already cooked the dish. They already have one. It's already done. It's perfect. Okay, and then when they're recording the show, they show you the cooking as it goes along. But from time to time, they may take a part of something from the already cooked or already baked version and either show it to you or use that part. Okay, so that's what I mean by already baked. It's the one I did ahead of time. Okay, and I apologize for having used that without having explained it before. Okay, so now my solution matches my already baked solution. Okay, and I should just be able to test it. So let's go test it. So let's see. We ought to be able to ask for instructor. That works fine. And then the next one is section. Let's test that. Okay, that looks good. And then the next one is going to be course. And how do I remember these? Well, I'm looking at the links in our navigation, well, what eventually will be a navigation bar. Right now it's just a navigation unordered list. And then the next one is semester. Let's give that a test. That works. And then student. And the very last one is registration. Okay, great. So why did we do this refactoring? Well, if we only put these URL configurations in one place for an entire project, we would just have too many in one spot. So the standard approach is to place this. Oh, here's something. I have all these imports that I don't need anymore. See how they're grayed out? So let's get rid of these imports because they're not being used anymore. Okay. And that looks good. Okay, and really I should test it again because I changed the code, but I'm going to cheat and not do that. Okay, so the top level URL configuration, the URLs.py, the one for the overall project, is going to always have a link for admin. It's always going to route to the admin. And then every app that we have in the project, it's going to forward to a URLs.py that's dedicated for that app. And then if we go to the one for this app, well, it's the same code that we had before, except that we don't need to import admin anymore. So we have another unused import. Okay, and that takes care of that. All right, so that was pretty good. That's a refactoring. This is going to make the code much more maintainable over time, because as we add functionality, kind of additional apps over time, we're going to find that we don't have one gigantic unwieldy URLs.py. So that's why it's a good practice. Okay, so what else are we going to do in part one? Well, the next thing we're going to do in part one is we're going to take a look at these views that we have. So let's open up the views for course info, and let's look at this. And what we have is what we call function-based views. Okay, and are function-based views bad? No, they're not bad. They're probably the original kind of views that we had in Django, and they've been kind of superseded by class-based views. And what the class-based views have that function-based views have not got. As we're going to see when we replace the first one, we have a more explicit support and mapping of the HTTP functions. Okay, so in the function-based view that we have here, all the HTTP functions, either a get or a post, they would go through the same code. Okay. What's a get? Well, a get is the kind of request that we get in when we click a link in a web page. And what's a post? Well, that's the kind of request that we get in when we click on a button to submit a form in a web page. Okay? And typically we want to be able to distinguish between the two. And right here with this code that we have, we're not easily distinguishing between those. So, in anticipation of that and a lot of other good features that come with class-based views, we're going to start to refactor the views so that they use class-based views. So let's begin with the instructor list view. So what I usually do when I'm replacing code is I'll toggle it into a comment, okay? And then I'll put the new code in and test it. And after I test it, I'll get rid of the comment. You don't want to leave a dead commented code in your production code. So let me show you a class-based view, and it's more succinct than the code that we have already, and that's one good thing that's that we have. So what do we see? Well, first of all, let's make this code a little bigger so we can see it. All right, and we have a class called instructor list, and it's a subclass of view. Okay, view needs an import. Now, I'm not sure I've really gone through how to do the import, but if we highlight the name of the class that isn't being found because it needs an import, and on my machine, I'm going to do a let's see, it's a command return. No, it's not a command return. Undo that. It's an alt return. And when I do alt return, it gives me import this name. And do I want it from Django views.view? Yes, I do. Okay. So now I have a proper import for that. It's up here at the top from Django views import view. Okay, and now we know how to do how to get PyCharm to add the import. We do an alt return or alt enter. Okay, and then that pops up the dialog where we can pick where we want to import it from. Okay, now within the class we have a method called get. Okay, this is the method that is going to handle requests that come in that are HTTP gets. What are HTTP gets again? Typically when we click on a link on an HTML page, we get we generate a request from the browser that uses the HTTP function get. Okay, so any link that has the proper URL, and what's the proper URL in this case? It's going to be one that says instructor slash, right? If it's a get, it's going to come to this method. What's a method? Well, we saw that last week when we were working on the or the week before last when we were working on the model. A function that is embedded in a class is called a method. Okay. So what are we passing in? Well, it always passes in a reference to the object itself, and in this case the request. Okay, we're going to use render again. Okay, and then we're going to pass it the request. We're going to pass it a reference to our template. Template is course info /instructorlist.html, and then the third thing we're going to pass into it is a context dictionary in which we have instructor list, which of course we created before, and instead of having created the instructor list early in the code like we did before, and then using the name instructor list when we built our dictionary, here we're just going to do it right in line. Okay, so we're just going to create that instructor list object right here, and that's it. That's less code than we had before. That looks pretty good. So can we forward to this the same way if we're using the course info urls.py? Not precisely the same way. We're going to want to do something slightly different. And what do we want to do? Well, let's go take a look at that. So let's go to the URLs, okay, and we need to change a couple things. All right, so here's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to have 3 arguments on this function call to path. Okay, and okay, the first one is just going to be the path instructor. That's fine. What used to be called instructor list view is now a class called instructor list. So instructor list view doesn't exist anymore. So instructor list, it's the name of a class. And how do we know to call the view, to treat it as a view? Well, it has a method called asView, and you have to put parens on the end of it. Okay, well, you know what? We're going to need to import that. So again, I'm going to highlight that, and I'm going to say alt return. And do I want to import instructor list view from course info views? Yes. Enter. And there it is. It's put it at the end of this import list. Remember to take the first one off. Okay. It's that good. Okay, I said there are going to be 3 parameters or arguments. So what's the third one going to be? Well, this is the one where we're going to plan ahead. As long as we're making fancier paths here, we want to have a third parameter or argument, and this is a name by which this path can be referred to. Okay, so we're saying that the name of this path is course info instructor list URL pattern. Now, is this what everybody calls them? No, it's not. Most people just call them course info instructor list. The problem that I have is that we use them in a context where it's not always obvious that it's a URL pattern, and we have a couple of things called instructor list. So I've decided that for my purposes I'd like to have a suffix on them called URL pattern. Now, how are we going to use this? Well, the beauty of urls.py and the URL patterns is that we can use them. They have a second use, and we're going to make use of these when we finally code the URLs to go into the href attributes of the links in our templates. Instead of hard coding them, we're actually going to point back to the URL pattern, and the URL pattern has another function. It'll actually generate a URL that's just perfect for where we want to use it. So did we have to do this today? No, we could have waited till next week maybe, but it's just as good as long as we're in here to do that. Okay, so this should be all the changes that we need. So at this point we should have refactored. Oh, the other thing I need to do is I need to go back to views and get rid of this dead code, right? And we've got 2 blanks before that, and that's that. So we've refactored the code in urls.py and views.py for instructor list, and now let's go test it. And let's go to instructor, and there it is. So again, when you refactor code, you don't change the functionality. Okay, what you do is you change the goodness of the code. How can the end code be better than the beginning of the code? It's easier to read. It's easier to maintain. It's easier to modify. Okay, and all these things are true of the changes that we just made. Okay. Great. So, guess what? You have enough information to do all the rest of the list of views, one for each of the model classes. So what I want you to do is go one at a time. Okay. First, well, here's what we could do. Let's do the first one ourselves. Okay. Let's clone this one here into that one there. Okay, so how we're going to do it? Well, let's say, okay, instead of that being instructor list, let's copy this down and it'll be section list. Okay, so okay, section list, we're going to call this section list, right? So section, right? The get's the same, that's fine. Course info, is it instructor list? No, it's section list, right? Section list. And then is in the context dictionary is are we going to use the name instructor list? No, we're expecting in the template, we're expecting it to be called section list. Okay, and do we want to pass all of the instructor objects? No, we want to pass all of the section objects. Okay, so that looks good. All right. I'm going to get rid of the dead code. Okay, does that look good? All right, so that should take care of our class-based section list view. And let's go to course info URLs, and then let's take the next one. You know, when I have these multi-line paths, I like to skip lines around them. It creates a bit of drama. Makes it easier to read for me. Okay? I think you may find the same thing. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to have 3 arguments. So we've got 1, 2, 3. Okay. And remember, instead of section list view, it's going to be the class name section list dot as view parens. Okay, if you leave the parens off, it doesn't work. I learned that the hard way. And then to add section list to the list of imports, I do alt return, and then I'll pick the first one, and that's good. So that's been added to the end, and I'm going to get rid of section list. Okay, and I like to again, I like to list these 1 per line like this, so I'll reformat that a bit. Okay, and let's see what we have. Just 1 blank line between the paths. Okay, and I think I've refactored the code for section list. And let's give it a test. One of the things I really like about the development server is, as long as you change and save your code, the development server reloads your changed code immediately. So let's say section, and there's a section. That's working fine. Okay, so now I'm ready to turn it over to you, and what I'd like you to do is to do the same refactoring for course, semester, student, registration, and then I'd like you to test each one of those. Okay, and I'm going to see you again soon in part 2, so I'll see you then. Bye bye.